Looking at my channel, it's obvious that I'm a sucker for TV shows with huge overarching mysteries that feed you information one teeny bit at a time, which I've given the name of Mystery Box Story. Usually, I tend to make videos on shows that have already ended, and then do a comprehensive explanation of all the mysteries and help answer any lingering questions. I've had my eye on a new mystery box show for the last few years, Manifest. Manifest has had 3 seasons, with a 4th and final one on the way. So far, Manifest has nailed the mystery box formula. There are so many complicated questions that the show has built so far, so many story threads to pay off. This last season might be one of my most anticipated series finales ever. So instead of waiting for the show to end and then making a video about it, I've decided to do something a little different. I'm going to do a little theory crafting. I've been watching and rewatching the show, researching, taking notes, reading other people's thoughts, and I think that just maybe, I can put together the puzzle pieces we have so far, and guess how the show is going to end. For people who are subscribed to my channel but have never heard of this show, Manifest is an NBC series. Well, it was an NBC series. NBC canceled it after season 3, and Netflix picked it up for a 4th and final season. It's a good thing too, because I think I would lose my mind if I didn't get closure on this thing. The basic premise is that a bunch of people get on a plane, which disappears and then reappears 5.5 years later. Netflix is releasing the first half of the final season on November 4th, 2022, and the second half sometime next year. And for people who found this video because they're fans of Manifest but have never heard of me or my channel, a mystery box story is a story with a plot primarily driven forward by a slow unraveling of complex and interconnected mysteries. You know, those kinds of slow burn serialized stories where every answer it gives about the plot raises 3 new questions until your head starts to hurt keeping track of it all. If you like Manifest, you should definitely check out some of the other mystery box stories I've talked about. Check out the playlist in the card. This concept of a theory video is a new one for this channel. I'm a big fan of theorist communities on the internet. I think it's so fun to pick apart details and evidence to see where a story is going. But this video might be a little different from other theory videos on YouTube. A lot of the time, I find myself getting frustrated with other online theorists regarding their general approach, not just with Manifest theories, but with all theories. Sure, they might look at all the evidence and details and fit things together in a way that makes logical sense, but they almost always ignore one crucial detail. These are works of fiction. It's not enough to look at diegetic plot points. If you really want to guess where the story is going, it's critical to look at things like themes, tone, writing style, audience expectations, strengths or limitations of the medium. All those things are way more important to determining how a story is going to end. And that sort of thing is exactly what I do here on this channel. I record laws of storytelling physics, and I analyze mystery box stories. I've been campaigning for what I believe is the ideal method for telling a story with a serialized mystery for years now. And Manifest is the closest to that method I've ever seen. Watching the show has been surreal because it's pretty much exactly the kind of show I'd want to write, written in exactly the way that I would write it. I think I'm in a really unique position here. Not just to put together the clues that the show has given us, but also to imagine myself in the shoes of the showrunners to figure out what direction they intend to go with this story. Let's get into it. I'll start by making a quick list of all the major questions left for the story to answer. The biggest overarching question driving the show is, what happened to Flight 828 and why? Where did the plane go? Why this particular plane? And besides Flight 828, this also applies to everyone else who went through similar disappearances, like Zeke, Griffin, the meth dealers, and Alzuras. And of course, what are the callings? Here's the thing, right? These questions are huge. World-alteringly huge. And they've been present from episode 1. With a plotline like this, I know I can't be the only one who's a little worried that the show could end up like Lost. Manifest and Lost have a lot in common, right down to the story centering around a plane crash. Is Manifest heading towards the same kind of underwhelming ending that makes people go, oh, that's it? I don't think so. In this case, I have faith in Manifest writers, for 2 reasons. 1, it's been years since Lost ended. There have been many other TV shows that attempted this style of mystery writing in the last decade. TV studios in 2022 know what audiences want, and with streaming changing the TV landscape, they have the flexibility to give it to them. 2, the creators of Manifest have gone on record saying that they planned out the entire story in advance. Which, thank Apollo. Can we take them at their word? Maybe, maybe not, but I trust them to do their jobs. Still, No amount of planning and foresight can help you avoid what some consider an unsolvable issue with the mystery box formula. When you have such a huge question hanging over the story for so long, eventually it gets so hyped up that no answer will be satisfying. That's part of what Doomed lost. The only way out of it seems to be something like what The Leftovers did. The Leftovers asked that initial question of why all those people disappeared. But from the very beginning, the subtext of the show told us that we would never be given answers. And the most important thematic message of the show is that answers don't matter as much as we think. I think there's another way out, a happy middle ground between giving full explanations and giving no explanations. And I think Manifest is in the perfect position to do it. I think that by the end of the show, when it comes to the callings, Manifest is going to give us a partial explanation. Here's what I mean. A big theme of the show is faith versus science. Everyone wonders whether the plane disappearing was an act of God, or whether there's a scientific reason. But ultimately, the show comes down mostly on the side of faith. Characters who act cold, logical, and utilitarian pretty much always come to the wrong conclusion, while characters who trust their instincts, the callings, and other people are rewarded. There is no doubt in my mind that the force behind the callings is intelligent and benevolent. How many times has a calling steered someone in a weird direction which turned out to be exactly where they needed to go? And how many times has another character wondered something like, what if the callings are just random, or what if the callings are evil, only to be proven wrong? That Bible verse they're always quoting, all things work together for good, is the core idea that drives the story. Everything the show has taught us so far has indicated that there's a force of good pulling the strings behind all this. It's even right there in the title. Manifest means the list of passengers on a plane, and it also means a message from God. So do I think that the show is going to reveal that this was all God the whole time? Like the Abrahamic God? No way. I don't think the final explanation will be so clear and explicit. Plus, I can't totally ignore the science side of things either. Characters have solved lots of problems thinking analytically. They figured out the link between the disappearances in Dark Lightning and the traces of Sapphire. Ben has saved countless lives with all his research. And there's also the meta reason that such an explicitly Christian answer wouldn't play well with a wide audience. So I think the final reveal will be a little light on details in that department. All that's really important is that we get confirmation that everything we've seen during the show is being manipulated by an intelligent, conscious force, and a general vibe of what that force might be. I'm imagining that the way they'll phrase it will be something like, oh, the universe is alive and can manipulate things to its own will. It'll probably tie into that stuff Fiona Clark was researching about how all humans are linked together through one collective consciousness. You know, make it sound scientific, but on a practical level, it basically is God.
That sounds sciencey enough to be true.
What's way more important is the why. What was the point of all this? Why make people disappear and come back? Why give them callings? And why these people? Well, real simply, I think that this intelligent force can see the future. Probably something like they exist outside of time and experience every moment at once. And there's some kind of future catastrophe that they're trying to avoid by doing all this. Giving certain people information and guidance to nudge them in a certain direction to avoid a bad future. I don't know what kind of disaster that would be. If I'm right, that would be the kind of thing that's slowly introduced and built up during the first half of Season 4. Looking at things objectively in the context of the story, the passengers of A28 aren't the only people who disappeared, so you could assume that all the other characters who went through the same thing are equally important. But again, we need to keep in mind that this is a story, and the story is about the people on the plane, so they have to end up mattering more. I think there's a reason why this intelligent force picked the people on Flight 828 out of all the other people in the world. I think the explanation will be something very similar to something that happened in another story I've read, An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. The premise of this book is that an alien robot shows up on Earth out of nowhere, and the main character, April, is the first person to stumble across it. Later on in the book, it's explained that the robot could see all possible futures, and it showed itself to April because it ran the numbers and saw that her being the first to see it would butterfly effect into the exact series of events that it wanted. Manifest will go with a similar route. The universe gave these people callings, not because there's anything unique about them, but because choosing them would lead to the most favorable outcome. And all the other people who had callings? They were chosen to give direction to the passengers. Griffin showed them what happens if they don't follow the callings. Zeke showed them what happens when they do. Alzuras gives the whole thing more legitimacy and reassures them that they're not crazy. This also works on a meta level. The reason that these characters were included in the story was also to introduce these ideas to the audience, to get their minds to go in certain directions. There's also the meth dealers. Their inclusion in the story served to introduce the Lifeboat Theory. The idea that with a group of people who came back together, they all have to succeed together in following the callings, or else they all die together. Everything that Ben does in Season 3 comes from a desperate attempt to get every single one of the passengers to trust the calling so that they don't all die. Except here's the thing. There's no way that's true. Of all the predictions I make in this video, this is the one I'm most confident about. The Lifeboat Theory is wrong. Completely wrong. How do I know? Because it's impossible. Michaela points this out more than once during Season 3. Getting that many people to all agree and work together towards a goal like that, there's no way. And even if Ben did pull off a miracle and got everyone to cooperate, there are still passengers who have died. There's no scenario where Ben succeeds in keeping the metaphorical lifeboat afloat that wouldn't feel incredibly contrived. No, instead I think Ben just misunderstood the reason why the meth dealers died. There's another angle to the situation that we aren't seeing. That's not to say that the death date isn't significant though. From what we know, the passengers will die on June 2nd, 2024 if they turn away from the callings. It's just the part where if one passenger dies, they all die that I think is wrong. The last part of this that I need to address is the fact that the callings usually take the form of a person's own voice speaking to them. That's too significant a detail to be random. I choose to interpret this very literally. Keeping in line with my theory about sending information back through time to prevent catastrophe, I think the characters' future selves are sending information back to their past selves. I think that near the end of the show, we're going to see the passengers figure things out, achieve some sort of enlightenment, and send those callings. The next question I want to address is, where did the plane go? Where do these people disappear to? To answer this, I'm mostly going off that one scene from Season 2 where we got a vision of Flight 828 and Alzurus' boat appearing together. Combining this with Alzurus writing about seeing a silver dragon, I think this is basically a confirmation that everyone who disappears teleports to the same place. I've seen people speculate on what time period this is, whether it's Alzurus' time or the modern day, but I think it's probably a place outside of time. Another dimension or plane of existence. No pun intended. This all links up with my thinking about this intelligent force existing outside of time as well. One final big picture question. Were all the passengers all killed on the flight and then resurrected? This is an idea that the show is constantly alluding to. It's what the Xers and the Believers think. Almost every character suggested as a possible explanation. There's the discovery of the tailfin in the ocean. There's that peacock that keeps showing up, which is a symbol of resurrection. And shout out to Reddit user Desdemona1231 for pointing out that Alzurus is an anagram for Lazarus, the guy in the Bible who died and came back to life. The show really wants you to consider this possibility. But I'd like to draw your attention to Law of Story Physics number 14. As soon as a character entertains a theory about one of the plot's central mysteries, that theory is dead. In other words, as soon as somebody in the story says, maybe this could be the answer, you can be sure that it's not the answer. It's not satisfying when a character stumbles into the right answer with limited information like that. Especially when it's such an obvious and underwhelming answer like they were dead the whole time. This show is going to want to stay far, far away from something like that after Lost. I don't think the passengers ever actually died. I think the idea of resurrection is more symbolic than literal. But then, why is the tailfin there? When Season 2 ended with some fishermen pulling 828's tailfin out of the ocean, it threw everybody for a loop. Everyone had a theory about how the real plane crashed into the ocean, or one of them is from another dimension or whatever. But, guys, Season 3 pretty explicitly answers this question. I don't understand why so many recent theories I see leave this part out. In Season 3, Episode 4, we see a video of the tailfin in a government lab, recovered from the explosion in the first episode. And it vanishes at the exact moment that Sanvi killed the Major. There was only ever one tailfin. The one in the ocean was the same one that landed in New York. It just teleported to the ocean because Sanvi did a bad thing. She went against what the callings wanted and brought them a step closer to dying on the death date. I don't see any other way to interpret this, and I'm confused as to why there's so much debate about it. So no, I think this pretty definitively proves that Flight 828 did not actually crash into the ocean and kill everyone. The writers wouldn't do a fake out like this and then do it for real later. That'd feel cheap. A couple of other smaller points. That post-credit scene with Captain Daly. What happened to him? Well, the show has made it clear that the right thing for all the passengers to do is to follow the callings, trust them. And what he did was the exact opposite. He tried to confront them at the source. He did basically the equivalent of trying to boundary break a video game instead of playing it the way the developers intended. So the callings went, you weren't supposed to do that, and now he's glitching out. I should be clear that that was just an analogy. I don't think that the show exists in a video game or a simulation. That would be really lame. I also think that something similar is going to happen to Egan in this new season. Egan has always treated the callings like a game to be solved for his own benefit, and I think that's going to get him in huge trouble at some point soon. Then what was the deal with Cal getting 5 years older in the Season 3 finale?
I love you, Mom.
The meta reason why they did this is that Cal's actor, Jack Messina, was getting older, so they needed to recast him. This is a much more elegant solution than just writing him out like they did with Walt on Lost. I'll admit, in terms of why this happened in story, I don't have a lot of specific ideas. It's too new of a development, and there's not enough information to work with. But I do think that Cal is going to be a lot more helpful in this season. Previously, it's always been clear that Cal knows a lot more than he's saying, but he isn't able to articulate it because he's a little kid. I think between him being older and whatever he saw in the time he was gone, he has come back with a much more complete picture of what the callings want and why. I don't think he's going to explain it to anybody. From a story perspective, he can't reveal everything he knows until the finale, so that the show still has enough mystery to last the season. But he'll be stepping firmly into that role of character who has all the answers but won't explain anything because of reasons that every mystery box story has. I bet he'll do a lot of teleporting around and showing up mostly in visions so that nobody ever gets a chance to pin him down and ask specific questions. By the way, for those not in the know, it was left ambiguous in the show as to whether Grace died in the finale. But the creators have confirmed that no, Grace will not be returning, that she really did die, and that her death is really important to the plot of Season 4. And finally, I have to mention Beverly. Her presence in the story has bugged me for a while. The first few episodes of the show made a huge deal about the fact that Michaela crashed her car and killed Evie. It heavily implies that Michaela was drinking and driving, and that she feels really guilty about it. But then after that, besides Michaela taking care of Evie's senile mother, Beverly, this has barely come up. This is a massive Chekhov's gun they've loaded, especially since they never confirmed exactly what happened that night. I think that Michaela's guilt is going to play a huge part in the finale, with her finally breaking down and admitting to how much the guilt has been weighing on her all this time, while also giving us some more never-before-seen details about what happened. The callings led Michaela to take care of Beverly, and Beverly has the suspiciously strong knack for saying or doing exactly the thing that will push Michaela's buttons despite having Alzheimer's. So I believe that the callings want to use Beverly to force Michaela to work through her feelings about Evie. Somehow, wrapped in whatever else the callings are trying to do, it needs Michaela to confront this and relieve that mental burden. Let's wrap things up, put it all together. I think that Season 4 of Manifest will go something like this. In the early episodes, we'll see hints of some kind of impending disaster that will occur on June 2nd, 2024. Not the death date, not the deaths of the passengers, something else entirely. Something world-ending. Ben will freak out about the death date even more. But eventually he'll figure out that the Lifeboat Theory is flawed. That not every passenger has to be perfect for them to succeed. During all of this, grown-up Cal is going to appear periodically and serve as kind of like a spirit guide, popping in and giving characters direction in addition to regular callings. There's lots of fighting, lots of stress, but by the end, we get our explanation of what this was all for. This higher power, God / the universe / the collective human consciousness that we all share / the callings, has been guiding them all to avoid whatever bad thing is going to happen. We're going to get some real trippy scenes in the last few episodes as characters get a glimpse of whatever other plane of existence the callings operate on. Michaela is going to face her grief over Evie, and Beverly, or the calling speaking through Beverly, will force her to admit some extra horrible detail about the crash that we haven't heard yet. The characters will all band together and solve this big crisis. Then finally, the characters will look back at everything they've gone through, and use this divine power to send messages back to their past selves to make sure that they always follow this particular path and do what they need to do to save the world. All things work together for good. That's my final prediction. Here's the thing though. I hope I'm wrong. Okay, that's not entirely truthful. It would be awesome if I got everything right. I would feel like a freaking genius. But the thing with mystery box stories is they're not supposed to be solved. Not until the end. There's this infamous quote by one of the creators of Westworld, another show that deals with these kinds of mysteries. It's annoying sometimes when people guess the twists. It's very gratifying, but stop doing it, please. This was a pretty controversial thing to say, but from where he's sitting, he has a point. This is where mystery box writing differs from regular old mystery writing, where all the clues are left out for you. Stories like this are meant to feel big, and if the mystery is guessable, then when it's revealed, it's going to feel small. You're supposed to wonder about these questions, but if you can accurately guess the answers, that means the writers tipped their hand too much. For Manifest, I'm counting on there being at least one more big twist that hasn't even been introduced yet. As much as I'd like to be right, I'd rather find out that the writers of Manifest are smarter than I am, that they're clever enough to surprise me. Keep an eye out, because once the rest of the show comes out, I'll definitely be doing a regular explainer video on this show. See you then, and we'll see how much I get right.
I'm a man of many mysteries.
Yeah, I don't think I can handle any more mystery.